Hello, wonderful peoples. This is Digi, and today I really wanted to talk about why I decided to switch mains from Wraith to Wattson in Apex Legends. Now, you're probably thinking, what? What? Why on earth would I switch from one of the most mobile, the sweatiest, the most aggressive legends to arguably a very defensive, very passive legend? Well, there's a lot of things I want to talk about today, so this is going to be a bit of a longer video, but let's just get right into it. Okay, so first let's talk about the meta of Apex Legends, which has changed a considerable amount since Season 0. Now, back in Season 0, before many of the newer legends were added to the game and you just had the main base legends, the meta was a lot more boots on the ground. Now, what do I mean by that? Since Season 0, we've seen the addition of many movement legends being added to the game. Originally, there were only a couple movement legends, mainly Pathfinder, Wraith, and Bangalore, if you want to consider her speed boost. Bloodhound, sure. Their ultimate does give them about a 30% speed boost, but you're not going to be using that all the time, so I don't really consider them a movement legend, so we're just going to skip past that real quick. Nowadays, since Season 7 with Horizon and Valkyrie and, the Octane and all that, odds are that while you're fighting somebody, they're suddenly going to launch up into the air in one way or another, and it's just going to be crazy mayhem. Back in the earlier seasons, players had to focus a lot more on their aim and making sure they were actually hitting their shots because they were stuck on the ground. They couldn't go anywhere. They did not have a get out of jail free card, so to say, unless you were playing Wraith, of course, who had, her instant phase, which is much coveted now. But why would I switch from that to Wattson, who is one of the lowest pick rates, only barely above Crypto? Well, first, I want to talk about Wattson in general. Now, although she does have one of the lowest pick rates in the game, she also has one of the highest win rates in the game. Now, that doesn't make sense. Now, I know what you're going to say. The reason she has the highest win rate, or one of the highest win rates, is because the only people still playing Wattson are the die-hard Wattson fans who are gods at the game who have been playing since Season 2, and they're absolutely obsessed with the French girl. They're walking around wingman solo queuing as Wattson. They're like, I'll go where I tell them to go, and that they just they live and breathe Wattson. And although there is definitely some truth to that statement, I think there's a lot more to delve into about why Wattson may be one of the best legends in Apex Legends, despite the fact that basically nobody plays her. Now, if Wraith's tactical was even 1 second or even half a second quicker, I think Wraith would easily be my favorite legend in the game again. But as she currently stands, I kind of had to say, okay, I'm frustrated with this. Respawn won't fix it, so bye-bye Wraith. Let's talk about Wattson's kit a little bit. Now, when talking about Wattson's tactical ability, we have to consider that she's not the only defensive legend in the game, so I think it's pretty fair to compare her a little bit against some of the other defensive legends in the game. First, let's talk about Caustic. Well, although his traps are interesting, to say the least, they can be used very offensively or defensively, whether blocking off a building or just giving you something between you and the enemy to possibly res a teammate, recharge a shield bad, etc. His traps were hit extremely hard in Season 8. They went from about 16, 12 damage to 6 and 1. His traps do basically nothing at the moment, and players are starting to catch on that they can basically walk through it and have no real consequence. So Caustic has kind of lost his power in the meta of Apex Legends. When you couple this with the fact that most players at this point know that you can just shoot at the bottom of his traps to instantly get rid of them, he is not really the strongest choice as an Apex Legends defensive player, and I honestly have not seen very many players recently playing as Caustic because of this. Now let's talk about Rampart. Now, Rampart, when she dropped, was pretty much trash in Season 6. She was pretty much useless and a sitting duck, and people quickly dropped off. Now, more recently, Rampart's become a much better legend, and although her amped walls do kind of require you to stay in one position for a certain amount of time, I've seen a lot of players actually using these walls just to hold angles for even a couple seconds to get the drop on an enemy, and it can be very effective in a very aggressive playstyle. And then, of course, due to her defensive nature, she can also hold off positions if she needs to very well. A good player can certainly use Rampart very effectively, but I usually see a lot of players just sort of camping with her. Now, of course, almost every single legend in Apex Legends has some sort of defensive capability. You can all play them in a defensive playstyle, but Wattson's a different deal. Now, as of Season 9, low profile has been removed from Wattson as well as all the other legends in the game, and this has definitely given her a little bit of a health buff. Now, coupled with her Season 8 buff with passive shield regeneration, which is double speed within her ultimate ability, she definitely has a much bigger health boost now than in previous seasons, which definitely is helping her become a much more versatile legend in the game. Now let's talk about why Wattsons and Wattson players are generally either really good or really bad. Really bad Wattson players are usually players who do not understand the player really, and they're just playing the character for fun, very casually. They don't really understand why they're playing Wattson. They just kind of put up very basic fences and know who I'm a defense legend, and they just sort of do their thing. Really good Wattson players or Wattson mains understand that she is a team legend. Now, this is part of why I think Wattson is one of the best legends in Apex Legends. Legends such as Wraith do a great job 1v3ing just because they can. And so a lot of Wraith players tend to run into fights and try to 1v3 and get killed instantly and put their team at a big disadvantage, which can result in the entire team losing the game. But Wattson mains are less likely to do this, and that's for a couple reasons. One, they're much less mobile, so if they get into a fight, they have to be better than the enemy. They cannot get out of that fight as easily as a Wraith or a Horizon or an Octane. They absolutely have to commit to the fight that they choose. And so they tend to be more careful about what fights they're actually picking, which is much smarter. Most good players you see actually will back out of fights if they feel like they are not going to win, back out of third parties or rejoin the fight later. They always make sure they have the advantage in the fight. They do not just mindlessly join a third party not knowing what the situation is. Also, when it comes to fencing, Wattson players who know the legend really well understand that a simple 1-2 fence is not going to do it. Most enemy players, especially in the higher levels, know that you can just shoot the nodes and the fence will go away quickly. And although this does require a little bit of time, it can be done almost instantly if a player knows what they are doing. On top of this, really good Wattson players tend to cross their fences in a very complex interwoven pattern that is very confusing to enemies, and the enemies cannot figure out where the fences are coming from, where they are going, and it becomes very intimidating. On top of this, in close range fights, you can quickly cut off angles that your enemies may want to go to and quickly pop off a bat, and then if that fence is no longer viable, you can simply pick it up real quick, or you can leave it there and use it as an angle to give you the advantage in the fight. I cannot tell you how many times I have run away from fights or been chased by enemies or held angles, and the only reason I won those fights was because I was able to choose the angles I was fighting from, which gave me a distinct advantage over my enemies. There is a reason that there is a Wattson quote in the game that says, "They go where I tell them to go." It very much plays into this idea that as a Wattson main, you can choose where your enemies are going to end up, and you can put them in the best possible place for you and your team. Now, also let's talk about Wattson as a bit of a sneaky bamboozler. Now, contrary to popular belief, Mirage is not the only bamboozler in Apex Legends. When you put down a Wattson fence, especially at a door or any place where an enemy can see the fence, they are going to assume that you are in there because they see evidence that you were there. And if they see you put up the fence, they're going to say, oh, there's a Wattson in there. Now, knowing that they think you are in there gives you an advantage, because while they're trying to push those doors, they're trying to push those angles because that's where they think you are, you can easily sneak around and get the drop on them while they're distracted with your fences and your other teammates who are staying inside the building. Now let's talk about Wattson's ability to cut off chasing enemies. Wattson pretty much has the ability to cut off any door or small area with her fences. If somebody is chasing you, it may not stop them from chasing you, but it may give you valuable time to recharge your batteries, get to a redeploy balloon, or any number of things that will save your life in the match. If you're playing as a solo queue Wattson, this is especially useful because it is pretty much your only way of escaping a gunfight. In general, players are more intimidated by Wattson fences than caustic gas. They will not run straight through the fence. Their most likely cause of action is going to be to destroy the fence or try and find a way around it real quick, because not only do the fences do damage to you, they also stun you, which most players do not want and would rather avoid. I would not recommend while running that you fence it up and then hold that angle. If you think that you have a really good angle and you have lots of health, then yes, you can use those fence to put a counter push, but in most cases, depending on the situation, I will put that fence up to slow the enemies down and give me time, and then I will keep running and I will try and go to unpredictable places. In general, when you're running away from a team, if you cut the line of sight with them, you can choose somewhere to go where they will not expect you to go, and they will have a much harder time following you. Wattson is a really good legend to play if you're thinking about improving your aim or just sort of improving your team playing as a whole, because Wattson can serve a very good aggressive playstyle. She can hold angles much better than a lot of other legends, and she's also one of the most fun and interesting characters in the game, with a long history and lots of lore in the game. Alright guys, so that pretty much wraps up the video for today. If you liked the video, consider subscribing. It helps a lot, and don't forget to like the video because that also helps. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.